This week on the show, we recap our EuroBSDcon experiences in Paris last week, tell the story behind a PF problem report that is finally fixed, and we'll also show you how to do screencasting with OpenBSD in this week's episode of BSD Now. BSD Now, episode 213, The French Connection. I recorded on the 27th of September 2017. Hi, I'm your host, Benedikt Reuschling.
And I'm Alan Jude.
Oh, and we're back from our conference month this week, and we have a lot of cool things to show you, so we should get right into our headlines, which is, of course, our recap of EuroBSDcon 2017 in Paris from last week.
Yes, it was news from only a week ago.
Very fresh.
Or, I only got home from Paris yesterday, so excuse the jet lag.
Wow, what an event.
Mm-hmm.
That was certainly amazing.
It was. So, if you somehow missed it, EuroBSDcon was held in Paris this year, and that was last week, and drew a record number of people this year. With over 300 attendees, it was definitely the largest BSD event that I had ever been to. And I was especially encouraged by the high number of people who said it was their first time attending EuroBSDcon.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that was certainly something good to see. And we also had a few more people on the FreeBSD Dev Summit, which we're going to cover in a couple of minutes. So my week started on the Tuesday. Alan was there a little bit earlier, a couple of days before, to do some sightseeing. But I arrived on the Tuesday, and on the Wednesday afternoon, I had a FreeBSD Foundation board meeting with the members who were going to be in Paris. We weren't complete. Some people were missing, but most of the people who are on the FreeBSD Foundation board are there, and we discussed, future conferences and funding and, our little things we do here and there that we are trying to increase over the years, new board members, things like that. So it was mostly planning. Sometimes when I tell people what we do, it sounds relatively boring because it also includes a lot of paperwork, but it's certainly also interesting and helps the project in the future to do new things like new hardware or maybe some new staff members we're trying to hire. So it looks good for next year, and budget-wise we're on a good road to success, and I hope we'll get a little bit more donation before the year's out. Okay, the Dev Summit started on a Thursday at a beautiful building in Paris, which is the Mozilla office, and that wasn't a new building, but it was a relatively old. Do you know what it was? Was it kind of an embassy or something?
Yes, I think it was the Austrian embassy or something in the past. I don't remember exactly. They told us, but it was early in the morning.
Yeah. So you would imagine a very old building, with pillars and gold everywhere. And Mozilla had their offices in there, so you could see all kind of Firefox logos in there and screens where they put up their current build status from continuous integration and all that. So that was certainly nice. So they provided the rooms and the snacks and the drinks for the breaks and coffee, of course. And we had a nice room for our group, so we were 45 people, if I recall correctly.
More than that.
Even more, yeah. Some of them could only go to one of the days because they were doing a tutorial or vice versa. But in general, it was a good outcome for a FreeBSD Dev Summit. Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of handshaking and greeting, and people who have never been before were also welcomed, of course. And we gathered in a small, or not so small actually, an adjacent room to our room where we had the breakfast, the second breakfast for most people, and which had a podium and a microphone and screens and, tables and chairs, of course. And I was organizing the Dev Summit this year again, so I opened it with a small quiz, which we haven't done before, which people could participate in to win a Mojix Power Bagel, which is a nice little extension cord or a power cord in a round format where many people can plug in as well, so you can share your power with other people, which is important at a conference because there aren't that many power outlets usually.
Yeah, I would say starting the first thing in the morning with that quiz definitely helped get everybody awake and focused and involved. You know, a lot of the people probably would have just tuned out if it had just been a regular opening talking type thing. But by focusing everyone with a little trivia game like that, I think that worked very well for getting everybody on track.
Yeah, sometimes we have to try new things, and if it didn't work out well, then we wouldn't have repeated it next year. But I was encouraged to try this at any other event where I'm going to, and I'm organizing any kind of Dev Summit, so it could be replicated.
Yes.
Yeah, after this, we started the work in progress session. We switched around. In the original schedule was a little bit different than I was planning it originally, but as long as we could stay flexible and the room provided for that, we had all kinds of ways of presenting our talks and things we wanted to cover. So the work in progress session, basically, I asked the developers a couple of weeks before the Dev Summit for things they are currently working on or want to get feedback on, or people looking for testers, which is similar to what they do at EuroBSDcon. And so they are we limited them to 7-minute time slots, similar to what we did at BSDcon this year. And that worked quite well because it gives you enough time to present your topic, but also keeping it small so that people don't get a full conference talk, for example. And the topics ranged from FreeBSD forwarding performance by Olivier Couchard-Labbé, of course, with nice flame graphs and performance charts. Fast booting options by Colin Percival, so he has a couple of ideas how to speed up the FreeBSD boot process. And Gallipatch under review, which would allow to attach multiple providers. And all those slides are on the wiki page for the Dev Summit as well, which we'll link in the show notes. Then there was lunch, and after lunch, the FreeBSD Foundation had two presentations prepared. So the first one was by our Executive Director, Deb Goodkin, a general update on staff and funding and how the foundation is doing, so that you get to know the people who haven't seen before. We had a couple of pictures there with our staff and board members, and also another presentation about our partnership with Intel. So an update from this side was given, and we also should have the slides on the wiki. If not, then I'll upload them so that people can review them. Generally, the talks were well presented, I guess. People had a couple of questions and were generally interested to hear what was done so far, and asked a few questions. The Intel representative who was there, Glenn Weinberg, he was also at EuroBSDcon, and he's our primary contact within Intel to get things like hardware or documentation for developers and things like that. Then, let's see, there is... then we had... we had a little coffee break, and then developers worked quietly a little bit on their own projects, but we kept the podium and the mic open so people could go to the podium and say, oh, I'm currently working on this, or I'm having this issue, can someone help? So it was a little bit unorganized, but still people had enough time to work on their own things that they prepared and brought to the Dev Summit. So it's not only talks that we give and discussions we have, but also some quiet time where people could talk amongst themselves or on their table, or in IRC, of course. And the day concluded with a dinner in a nice restaurant in Paris, which allowed to continue the discussions of the day, and also see other attendees from like the tutorials that they had in parallel at the conference venue.
Yes, and also NetBSD people and OpenBSD people and other people that were at the conference.
Yep. There's a lot of welcoming and hi again and good to see you, and that's nice to see the people back on the first day.
Yep. The second day of the Dev Summit began with the talk about CAM-based SDIO, stack developed by EuroBSDcon, who's a brand new FreeBSD committer. His work would allow access to Wi-Fi cards and modules and other things on embedded boards like the Raspberry Pi Zero that use the SDIO interface to transfer data and so on. After that, we had a discussion and Q&A session with the FreeBSD core team. Most of the core team was there, save for Benno Rice, Chris Moore, and John Baldwin. And obviously, Baptiste was tied up organizing the conference, but we still had quite a few people. We discussed a bit the new FCP, or FreeBSD Community Proposal System, and that was introduced at BSDCon. And, this way, a bunch of the developers that weren't at BSDCon got to hear more about it and ask their questions and so on, about the hows and whys of it and so on. And then myself and Benedict were asked to describe our experiences as being new core members, being on core for the first time, whereas mostly other people in the room had done it at least once before, and encouraging more people to run in the election, which will be in the summer of next year. After a short break there, Scott Long gave a talk overview of the work on NUMA, or non-uniform memory architecture. Specifically, now that especially the newer AMD servers, but also Intel servers, have multiple domains, it means that RAM that's connected to CPU socket number 1 is slower to access from CPU socket number 0. And so having the OS know about that and decide I'm going to allocate memory for this connection on the network on the CPU where I'm going to run the process is going to use it, means that you'll get better speed and so on. And so Netflix has interest in this work and is funding the beginning of the design for the architecture for that.
Mm-hmm.
Then just before lunch, Christian Swartz presented his work on zRepl, which is a new ZFS replication solution that he's written in Go. This sparked interest from a number of developers, and they've created the start of a port. And we've also suggested that Christian should present this at the next conference as a full 45-minute talk rather than just a quick work in progress type thing.
Mm-hmm. That was good. Yep. I had to.
Then after that, yes, Benedict had to duck out because it was time for him to teach his tutorial on Ansible, which apparently was well attended. How did that go?
Oh, that was super. I was arriving like 15 minutes before the tutorial was starting, and the room was already packed. Michael Lucas was still there from giving his tutorial in the morning on ZFS, and I guess people thought this would be a good combination, seeing him in the morning and me afterwards. And I mean, I had a lot of people at EuroBSDcon already, and I was astounded by how many people are now in my tutorial at EuroBSDcon. So I'm thinking of submitting it for BSDCon next year, because the topic isn't going to get stale anytime soon. So I might as well repeat it there. And if people are interested and couldn't go to Asia or to Euro, then BSDCon is a good way to listen to my talk or my presentation if you're interested. And of course, there was a good interaction between the audience, so I didn't talk all 3 hours. We had a couple of breaks in there, and I had some feedback where people had a little bit more experience with Ansible, and they provided hints for other modules I could use, or gave other participants some pointers where they could look, or things they had tried out and which I hadn't covered. So my talk was basically an introductory section on Ansible, how to use that with the BSDs. And I think after the talk, many people were getting ideas how they could manage their infrastructure better with Ansible. But what was happening at the Dev Summit? I totally lost everything on that afternoon from the Dev Summit side.
Mostly getting work done after that. It was got a bit quieter, and I mostly worked on things.
Yeah, I guess we had good mixture of talks and also quiet time, which is important, because then people have, they can walk around and ask someone, hey, can you look at my patch, or can you help me with this? without disturbing someone who's giving talks all the time.
Yeah, I ended up building an entire network at the table where I was sitting. I broke out the little USB switch and had my laptop, my sacrificial laptop, and my Mac all connected and working on solving a problem with the bootloader so that I can boot FreeBSD on the Mac.
Ah, excellent. Yeah, that was you gave a short talk about your experiences so far.
Yep. So, like Benedict mentioned, we had organized dinners on both the Thursday and the Friday. These were interesting to see them manage to achieve the feat of organizing a dinner for over 100 people in one place and getting them all served quickly and so on. Those were quite nice. You know, got to talk to some people and enjoy some good food and good desserts too. Personally, I have a bit of trouble hearing people when you get 100 people in a room.
Yeah, it's very loud.
The background cacophony gets pretty bad.
But also a lot of people brought their significant others to Paris. So
Yes.
they joined us for the dinners, and it was nice to see that, you know, the typical stereotypes of FreeBSD hacker isn't that typical. So they also have lives and you know, wives and children. Well, that was nice.
So on the Saturday, we did something a bit different. Partly, I imagine, because with over 300 people, it wasn't possible to get into a restaurant. We had our social event, which was a river cruise down the Seine. This took the form of a standing dinner with a wide selection of appetizer-type dishes. So we were on a barge on the river. There was both a top deck and then a dining area underneath. I spent much of the evening on the top deck. There were tables around with various bits of food in a bar, but mostly I got to kind of walk around and talk to a lot of different people. And the advantage of being on the roof of the barge basically was that being open to the air, the echo from all the voices wasn't as bad, and it was much easier to hear the people you were talking to. Although after a while, I did feel the need to sit down after a couple of hours. So I ventured downstairs and found a seat and sat with some people and talked. But I definitely liked the standing dinner type setup sometimes, just to be able to get to walk around and talk to a lot more people than I would have if, you know, when I was sitting at a table, there's 6 or 8 people at your table that you can reasonably talk to, you know, without yelling across the room, basically. Whereas with the standing type dinner, it was easy to walk around and so on. Although, you know, I definitely didn't eat as much as I did at the Thursday night dinner, where they just brought giant plates full of meat, one after another.
Yeah, I heard some groups going after they let us off the ship again, going to a restaurant at 1 a.m. in the morning and starting to get a steak or something. That was certainly a little bit much.
But yeah, so I like having both different dinner formats for sure. I also like, you know, the Tokyo style of just get a smaller group together and go to different places. You know, I have to make the concerted effort quite often to not just go out with the same people every night, just to get to talk to different people and try different things.
Yeah, that's true. I'm also trying to get a diverse group because I talk to many people during the day anyway, and you want to spend a certain amount of time with the people you like, but it's also good to show some other people who are a little bit shy or may not approach you right away to, you know, that you can talk to them and you could have dinner with them. It's normal. So I try to get a little bit of...
the best way to make new friends is to start hanging out with new people.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was that.
Speaking of new people.
Yes.
Speaking of new people,
I would also like to thank all those BSD Now viewers who attended the conference and made a point of introducing themselves to both Benedict and I. It was very nice to meet everybody, but also just to see there were quite a few people who said, you know, the only reason they had come to the conference is because they had heard about it on BSD Now, and I've asked most of the people that told me that to please email in to feedback at bsdnow.tv and tell us how their experience was being there for the first time, in hopes of encouraging more people to make their first time out to a conference at the next available conference.
I had multiple times people I've never seen before approach me, "Hey, Benedict," and I was like, how do I know you? They're like, oh, you're in BSD Now. I watch it so often. And it's, okay, there. You've seen me, but I haven't seen you before.
Yes.
Yeah, that was certainly nice to see people
Yep.
in the BSD
And
community.
the conference was live streamed by the nice people at GConf. They streamed it both through Scale Engine and through YouTube. And both of those were recorded server-side as well. So that means that we have all of the videos in their unedited format available immediately, to the point that I was watching part of the keynote on my phone while laying down in my hotel room while the keynote wasn't even over yet.
Yeah,
Love
that's
that DVR type thing.
a good way to get people who couldn't make it for some reason to still participate in the conference with a little bit of delay.
Yep. So in the show notes, I have links to all of the videos. So any of those talks that you were interested in, you can watch recordings of the live video immediately.
And we certainly couldn't get to all of the talks because in the afternoon, I had to proctor the BSDA exam. So I missed pretty much the epic Baptiste versus Antoine fight between the BSDs.
Yep.
But I will certainly watch the recording. I'm interested in the outcome because I haven't seen part 2 yet. And sometimes it's in this case, in this conference, it wasn't so bad. But sometimes it's like, I want to be at both of these talks. They are in the same time slot. Which one do I go to? And this is a good way of watching the other one while still being sure that you get the other in the recording.
Yep.
So yeah, huge thanks to the organizers, the program committee, and sponsors of EuroBSDcon. Next year, for people who missed this one, EuroBSDcon will be in Bucharest in Romania. So that's an interesting location for sure. And we'll keep you updated on call for papers and more as the conference progresses. But it's still a year out, so there's time.
For sure. So, next story, we finally have the article I've been trying to talk about for a while. So we covered, Christoph made a nice blog post for us about a bug in PF that he fixed, inspired by our coverage of the bug in Illumos. But, that wasn't the story I was actually thinking it was. It was a different one. So here's the actual story of PR 219251. So this is the story I wanted Christoph to tell, but it's the bug I watched him fix at the Essen Hackathon earlier in the summer. So Christoph says, as I threatened to do in my previous post, I'm going to talk about PR 219251. The bug report dates from only a few months ago, but the first report that Christoph remembers actually came from Sean Webb on Twitter, of all places. Despite there being a stack trace it took quite a while, nearly 6 months in fact, to figure out what was going on. It actually took Rashad Patuk managing to distill the problem down to a smallish test script to make real progress on this problem. His test case meant that I could get core dumps and then experiment with them. It also provided valuable clues because it could be tweaked to see which elements were required to trigger the panic and which were not. So the test script starts a VNet jail, adds an ePair interface to that jail, sets up PF in the jail, then reloads the PF rules on the host. Interestingly, the panic does not occur if that last step is omitted. So only reloading PF on the host is actually what's crashing PF in the jail.
That's certainly difficult to reproduce.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, that's not the desired behavior, right? It's supposed to be a completely separate instance of PF, so they shouldn't be crashing each other. So if we look at the code and see what's actually happening.
Yep, some code reading is definitely required.
You say, we try to fetch a counter value here, but instead we're dereferencing a bad pointer. There's actually 2 here, so already we need more information. Inspection of the core dump reveals that the state pointer is valid and contains sane information. However, the rule pointer points to a sensible location, but the data is 0x dead code. This is actually the memory allocator being helpful in debug mode and writing garbage over all freed memory, so that when you see that your data is 0x dead code, you're actually accessing data that's been or memory that's been freed. So that's how we know it's a use after free bug. In other words, the rules have been freed while there's still active states that are pointing at them. Somehow we have a state which describes a connection that PF knows about, which points to a rule that no longer exists. The core dump also shows that the problem always occurs with states and rules in the default VNet, the host's instance of PF, not one of the PF instances that's in the jail. That matches with the observation that the test script does not trigger the panic unless we reload the rules on the host. So he says, great, we know what's going wrong, but now we need to work out how we can get into that state. At this point, we're going to have to learn something about how rules and states get cleaned up in PF. Don't worry, if you have no idea how it works, that's fine, because before this bug, Christoph didn't know either. The states keep a pointer to the rule that they match. So when the rules are changed or removed, we can't just delete them. Right? So because states point to the rule, when the rule's removed from the config file, it still stays in memory. States get cleaned up when connections are closed or when they time out. This means that we have to keep old rules around until all states that reference them have expired, and then we can clean up the rule list. When rules are removed, the pf unlinked rule function adds them to the v_pf unlinked rule list. And we'll talk more about why that function has a v underscore in front of it a bit later. From time to time, the pf purge thread will look over all the states and mark the rules that are used by a state. Once that's done, then all the states we know have counted the rules that they're referring to, and any rule not marked as in use can be removed because no state is pointing to it. That can be a lot of work if you've got a lot of states. People can have hundreds of thousands of PF states open. So the PF purge thread breaks this up into smaller chunks, iterating only over part of the state table in each run. So if we look at the second block of code here, we can see what it actually does is for each VNet, we select the current VNet and we do this bit of work, right? We get the index of the last place we checked, and then we do a bunch of this work. And we do that once for each VNet. So we iterate over all of the virtual PF instances, which is the VNet for each function there. Check if it's active, which goes back to the bug we talked about last week where we were poking things before they were active. And then we check the expired states with the pf purge expired states functions. We start at state index or IDX and only process a certain number, which is determined by the pftm interval setting, so that we don't do all the work at once, so that we don't pause the firewall for too long. The pf purge expired states function returns a new index to tell us how far we got before we ran out of time. And then next time we'll just start there and move forward. So remember when I mentioned that v underscore prefix on the function names? Those are per VNet variables. They work a bit like thread local variables. Each VNet, or each virtual network stack, usually one per jail, keeps its state separately from the others. And the v variables use a pointer that's changed whenever we change the current active VNet, such as using the cur vnet set and cur vnet restore functions. And that's tracked in the cur vnet variable. In other words, there are as many vpf vnet active variables as there are vnets, which is the number of vnet jails plus one for the host system. Why is that relevant here? Note that the IDX variable is not a per vnet variable, but we handle multiple pf instances. We run through them all, in fact. That means we end up checking the first X states from the first VNet. And then instead of coming back and doing the second X states from the first VNet, we do the second X states from the second VNet. Right? So instead of checking the first chunk in all, say, 10 VNets, and then on the next run doing the second X states on all VNets, we end up doing the first X states for VNet 0, and the second X states for VNet 1, and the third X states for VNet 2, etc. So we only do like one of the middle chunks for each VNet, but a different chunk for each VNet. And then we get to the end and we'll say, okay, every rule that's not currently referenced by any of those states is safe to delete. Except we only have gone over a fraction of all the states because we picked up where we left off. We used the marker for how far we got in VNet 0 to decide where to start in VNet 1, which didn't do what we intended. So this is why is that relevant here? Right, we just said that. That, of course, means that we've run through all the states in a VNet while we're only checking some fraction of them. So when the pf purge unlinked rules thread runs, we end up freeing rules that are actually still in use. And then when we go to look at one of those states and dereference the pointer to the rule, that rule doesn't exist anymore because we freed it. And then we end up with this corrupted memory.
Yeah, this is certainly not trivial.
Yeah. The problem only happens if we reload rules on the host because the active rule set is never freed, even if there's no states pointing to it yet. So that explains the panic, and the fix is actually quite straightforward. That index variable needs to be a per VNet variable, like vpf purge index, and then the problem is gone. As is often the case, the solution is to this fairly hard problem turns out to be really simple, changing one variable name. As you might expect, finding the problem takes a lot longer than fixing the problem. So yes, special thanks to Christoph for writing up the detailed post explaining how the problem was found and what caused it and so on, and just for taking the time to do that for us.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting to see how a bug manifests itself and how hard you can bang your head against the table to find the solution. It's definitely sometimes driving people nuts to not finding the error when it's right in front of them, or it's just a small thing like this.
Yep. So our next story, or actually it's time for a sponsor.
Yep.
Head over to ixsystems.com/BSD Now and check out their ultimate guide to buying a new server for open source. You know, the people over at IX Systems are definitely the people you want to talk to if you want to buy a new server. They know all about all the BSDs, or even Linux if you really want to do that. But they can integrate the hardware for you. And they just make sure that the experience of buying that server is that much easier than doing it yourself.
Yeah. And instead of saying, I want this server with this much RAM or this much CPU, tell them what you are using the server for or intend to use it for. And then they will probably suggest use something else, which is not to get more money out of your pocket, but which serves your problem better by recommending a faster setup or beefier machine that is easier to manage and things like that. All of these things can be done by IX Systems because they've built thousands and probably hundreds of thousands of these systems for customers in the big data, education, development fields. So all kinds of things that require certain storage requirements, for example, or have some special requirements like government, or need certain performance throughput numbers that they must reach, and the servers that they build are all custom made towards your solution that you want to have.
Yeah, I've seen lots of people shoot themselves in the foot by spending all their money on the wrong thing when they build a server. It's like, oh, we need writes, so we're going to get a huge slog device. It's like, well, that device never needs to be bigger than a single digit number of gigs. So buying a 2 terabyte NVMe for that was probably silly.
Yeah. And you could spend the money somewhere else or better in other components.
The white glove support is totally worth it too. But they know what they're doing, and they're the people you want to talk to. And actually, on their blog, they have a nice summary of VBSDcon, which they help sponsor. So
oh yeah, excellent.
We're checking out this as well. We have a blog post here by Michael Dexter. He said the third biennial VBSDcon hosted by VeriSign took place September 7th through the 9th, with FreeBSD Developer Summit taking place on the first day. VBSDcon and IX Systems MeetBSD conference have alternated between the East and West Coasts on alternating years, and these two events play vital roles in reaching both the Washington, D.C. area and the Bay Area Silicon Valley audiences. Whereas MeetBSD serves many BSD vendors, VBSDcon attracts unique government and security industry demographics that aren't found anywhere else. Conference time and travel budgets are always limited, and bringing these events to their attendees is a much appreciated service provided by their hosts. The VBSDcon FreeBSD Dev Summit was a strong focus on OpenZFS, the build system and networking, and the wish list for FreeBSD 12.0. How to best incorporate the steady flow of new OpenZFS features into FreeBSD, such as dataset level encryption, was of particular interest. This feature from the Linux-based storage vendors is a tribute to the growth of the OpenZFS community, which is vital in light of the recent death of Solaris and ZFS at Oracle. There have also been there's never been more demand for OpenZFS on FreeBSD, and the Oracle news further confirms our collective responsibility to meet that demand. The official conference opened with Michael Dexter's talk, Isolated BSD Build Environments, which explained how the Beehive hypervisor can be used to tour all versions of FreeBSD since 5.0 onward, and how to build specific source releases on demand for tracing regressions to their offending commit and so on. It was followed by a FreeNAS user who made a good point that the FreeNAS is an exemplary entry vector into the Unix and enterprise storage fundamentals, given that many of the vectors are generation. Most of the people that got into BSD nowadays got here by a path that's not really going to make sense in the future, or already isn't the way that new people are going to get into BSD. And so we have to figure out what the new ways people are going to get into BSD are.
Yep. You want to continue, or should I take the next one?
I says, where many of us discovered Unix and the internet via console terminals at work or school, smartphones are only delivering the internet without Unix. With some irony, both iOS and Android are Unix-based, yet offer few opportunities for a user to actually learn or leverage a Unix environment. The next two talks were the history and future of core dumps on FreeBSD by Sam Guider, and using package source for multi-platform deployments in heterogeneous environments by Clifford Williams. That one was especially interesting, learning that people still use HPUX and that they have a desire for a modern version of Python on it, and package source provides that. And they also say, strongly recommend anyone wanting to speak at EuroBSDcon read Sam's accompanying paper on core dumps, because it's one of the perfect examples of what a paper would look like for that conference. Core dumps are one of the things that you rarely think about until you are in a drop everything priority and you need to think about them, right? So it's nice to have somewhere you can look when you want to know how that works.
Yep, that's certainly something you should try out.
As for the other talks, any and all dtrace talks are always appreciated, and George Devil-Neal's did not disappoint. Based on his experience with the TeachBSD project while bringing FreeBSD-based computer science education to schools around the world. And then we had the security-related talk by John Mark Gurney and Dean Freeman, as well as one by Michael Shirk to represent VBSDcon's consideration for the local community, and made a convincing point that the BSD should give concerted efforts to qualify for the common criteria, FIPS, and other governmental security requirements.
Yep, that would be a nice thing to bring FreeBSD into that ecosystem, if you want to call it that.
Yep. And then I hosted an OpenZFS BOF, and I talked about that. And Benedict ran an Ansible talk and talked about that. And we also had a Beehive BOF and plenty of hallway track and other stuff that was done there as well. The food at VBSDcon was excellent and culminated with an after-dinner dramatic reading of Michael W. Lucas's latest book to raise money for the FreeBSD Foundation.
That was certainly something special.
A great time was had by all, and it was wonderful to see everybody that was there.
Yeah, good times at BSDcon, and I hope we'll be there the year after next. So after our conference recaps in this first section of the show, we're going to go to our news roundup this week, which has the first item. FreeBSD 10.4 release candidate 2 is available. And so it's very soon that FreeBSD 10.4 will be released. And this is the very last chance, I guess, to find bugs before the official release is cut. And the noteworthy changes since 10.4 RC1 are, given that the RMD64 disk 1 image was overflowing, more of the base components installed into disk 1, the live file systems had to be disabled. And most notably, this removed the compiler toolchain from the disk 1 images. All the disabled tools are still available with the DVD1 image, though, which is a bit bigger, of course. So people have to be careful if they have been using the disk 1 images before and finding that they're missing the...
In almost all cases, you don't use the compiler on the disk 1 image. Like it's been deleted in head, I think, for a while. Part of it is that, the Clang binary itself is 50-something megabytes.
That's a big thing.
Yeah, and you're trying to fit this image on a 650 megabyte CD.
Is a problem, or is a challenge at least. The ASNI driver now no longer shares a single FPU context across multiple sessions in multiple threads, which addresses problems seen when employing ASNI for IPsec. And support for NetMap by the IXGBE driver has been brought into line with the NetMap API present in Stable 10. And IXGBE4, or in that man page, you can find that it now correctly handles VFs in its NetMap support again, instead of treating these as PFs. During the creation of AMD 64 and i386 VM images, etc update and merge master databases now are bootstrapped, akin to what happens along the extraction of base TXZ as part of a new installation via BSD install. And this change allows for both these tools to work out of the box on VM images and avoids errors seen when upgrading these images via FreeBSD update. If you are still on the Stable 10 branch, you should test upgrading to 10.4 and make sure there are no problems with your workloads. And additionally, testing specifically on the features that have changed since 10.4 Beta 1 would be helpful. So if you can spend a little time testing that and report anything you find out of the ordinary, that would be helpful for the release to be as stable and in a well provided way as possible. And again, this is the last release of the 10 stable branch, so there will be no 10.4, and people after that should switch to the 11.
10.4 is what this is.
Yeah, right, 10.5 I meant, yeah.
All right.
Sorry. So last release of 10, the stable branch, and there will be no further release from this branch. So switch to 11 either now or after this release has been cut.
All right, next up we have OpenBSD changes of note from Ted Unangst. He says, remember, EuroBSDcon is in 2 weeks. Actually, it was last week. Sorry we took so long to get to this. Be sure to attend early and often. If you missed it, sorry, try again. But many changes going on here, including many and varied documentation updates to libcrypto, new man pages, rewrites of old man pages, expanded bug sections, and more. Only allow upward migration in VMD, so you can't go backwards. Added a README to the syspatch build system in case you want to run your own syspatch server. Moved the kernel relinking code from etcrc into a separate script usable by syspatch. kernel patches can now be reduced to just the necessary files. Made all the callers to soGetOpt responsible for allocating the memory so that the allocates and frees happen in the same place instead of two different places. Start using waitPID instead of wait in most programs to avoid accidentally collecting the wrong child. Made the CU, which is a serial console command, call is a TTY before making assumptions about, if the current terminal is a TTY. Switched Mandak rendering of mathematical symbols and Greek letters from trying to imitate the character's graphical shape, which resulted in unintelligible renderings in many cases, to transliterations conveying the character's meaning. Updated libexpat to 2.2.4, which is fixed copying of partial UTF-8 characters. Workaround bug in F5's handling of supported elliptic curve extensions. RFC 4492 only defines elliptic curves for client hello. However, the F5 is sending a server hello with these curves. We need to skip over it since our TLS extension parsing code is now more strict about it. Now, after you finish your first install, it runs syspatch-c to check for any updates that are needed. If there's an smap present, you want to clear the PSLAC register on kernel entry and interrupt so that only the code in copy in and copy out that needs to run with it set will actually do so. Panic if it's set on entry of the trap or syscall. So that's apparently work taken from NetBSD there. Added a bunch of new drivers for ARM, including RKTemp, which I think is a temperature sensor, MV pin control, MV MPIC, MV NetA, MV MDIO, MV PXA, RKIIC, and RKPMIC. They also changed Mandoc so that it doesn't exec RM. We know there's exactly one file and directory to remove, so simply run CMP instead.
Okay, well that solves it.
Yep. Bunch of other minor changes. Revisited the 2Q queue sizes. Limit the hot queue to 1/20th the cache size. Up to a maximum of 4096 pages. Limit the warm and cold caches to half the cache. This allows us to more effectively notice interest in buffers instead of losing it in a large hot queue.
Yeah, some of these nodes are relatively short, but I guess people can dig deeper if they're interested in a certain item.
When Exinit starts an X server that listens only on a Unix socket, prefer display equals Unix:0 rather than display equals :0. This will prevent applications from ever trying to fall back to TCP if the Unix socket connection fails. But then that was reverted.
Well, okay. Needs probably some more work.
Added the -Z and -Z options to APMD, which is the power management daemon on OpenBSD, to automatically suspend or hibernate when the laptop becomes low on battery. They've removed the original pre-IETF ChaCha20 Poly 1305 cipher suites from, I'm guessing, LibreSSL. I'm guessing in using the post-IETF versions. They've added a URNG device, which supports various USB random number generators. Instead of adding one device per physical device, start bundling them into a single driver. And lots and lots of other changes.
Oh, yeah.
Including fixing support for the 486DX CPU by not calling CPU ID. He's like, I used to own a 486, now I don't. Also defers probing of floppy drives to eliminate the delay during boot caused by the floppy drive. So we probed those later on because, probably not that important you don't need to hold up the whole boot process for that. They also move some mutaxes, conditional variables, and thread-specific data routes, the pthread once and pthread exit from the pthread to libc, along with low-level bits to support them. Now, it lets thread-aware code work with just libc.
Mm-hmm. Oh, they also have a new POSIX xlocale implementation, complete as long as you only use ASCII and UTF-8, as you should. And it closes with, round and round it goes, when 6.2 stops, nobody knows. A peek at the future. Oh yeah, there's some poetry at the end. While we're on the subject of OpenBSD, our next section is screencasting with OpenBSD. And this is is it a blog post? Yeah, it seems like, it's a journal entry basically. And it describes how to do screencasting with OpenBSD. So it describes a lot of setting steps. We have most of these in the show notes, but it starts off with any USB microphone should appear as a new audio device. And here's a D-message output for the microphone by ART. So you can see a couple of messages here for UAudio 0 being connected with the number of mixer controls. This is very audio technical stuff for people who are in that area. They can probably understand more than at least I do. But there's an audio CTL which can read off of the specific characteristics of the device. So you do audio CTL -F and the detected audio device and /dev. Then you grab for record because that's what you're interested in apparently. And then next up you can test the recording from the second audio device using AU-CAT, which is AudioCAT basically. And you provide basically -F RSND/1 and you output that to file.wave. And if the device also has a headset audio, it can be played through the same device, which uses AuCAT in the same way. Instead of -O, you use -I for the input, and you provide the file wave you just created. And then there's screen capture with XVFB. The rate at which a frame buffer for your video card is a feature of the hardware and software you're using, and it's often very slow. And X11 VNC will print an estimate of the bandwidth for your system that you're running. So if you start X11 VNC, there's a little frame buffer rate that is being displayed. And in this example, it's about 4 frames per second. We can do much better by using a virtual frame buffer. So here I'm setting up a new screen, setting the background color, starting CWM, and an instance of Xterm. And much better now. You can see that the frame rate is now around 20 frames. And if you make a connection to this virtual screen using raw encoding to eliminate time wasted on compression, you pretty much just call VNC viewer, in this case localhost, and you provide the dash encoding's raw format to it. And if you want to do a test recording with sound, then the whole command line of FFmpeg is rather long, but it provides all the things that you need, 800 by 600 resolution, and X11 grab for grabbing the input source, and then a couple of audio codec definitions, I guess. And you provide it, or you put it out into out.avi. And there's a note here that says, always stop the recordings and playback using Q, not Control-C, so that the audio inputs are shut down properly, and you don't have anything hanging around still. Screen capture with Zephyr. Zephyr is perhaps the easiest way to run X with a shadow frame buffer. This solution avoids reading from the device's or video card's RAM, so it's reasonably fast. So you can see here that there's about 12 frames per second maintained by this command. And to capture keyboard and mouse input, press Control, then Shift. And this is very handy for using navigating a window manager in the nested X sessions. Now for arranging windows, the author says of this article that he has sometimes found it helpful to launch applications and arrange them in a specific way. And this will open up a web browser listing the current directory and position windows using XDO tool. And you can see the configuration all provided in the blog post. This will position the windows precisely so that it appears to be in a Tmux window on the right. So you have everything nicely arranged for your setup here. And if you want to do audio-video sync, because if you find that the audio is way out of sync with the video, you can adjust the start using the -SS before the audio input to specify the number of seconds to delay. My final recording command line that delays the audio by 5 seconds, 0.5 seconds, writing 12 frames per second is another FFmpeg line, which is rather long. And now you want to try probably sharing a terminal with Tmux. If you're trying to record a terminal session, Tmux is able to share a session. And in this way, a recording of an X-frame buffer can be taken without even using the screen. Start by creating a session, so you run Tmux basically, and then on the remote side, connect to the same socket, and you use Tmux attach, providing the Tmux session they're interested in. And then it goes into how to take screenshots with ImageMagick. This is relatively straightforward here. And it finishes off with a section on audio processing and video transcoding, which basically is an even longer FFmpeg command line. So the first step is to ensure that the clip begins and ends where you'd like it to, and the following will make a copy of the recording starting at basically 0 and ending at 9:45. And so this device or this command shows you how to do this. And if you want to set the gain correctly, which is very important, with an analog mixer, but if you're using a USB mic there may not be a gain option. So simply record using its built-in settings and then adjust the levels afterwards using utilities such as normalize. So first extract the audio as a raw PCM file and then run normalize over it. And then next merge the audio back in with FFmpeg. So FFmpeg is a very powerful tool, but it's it can do a lot of things. It's very powerful, but it needs a little bit getting used to. The final step is to compress the screencast for distribution. And if you want to encode it to VP8/Vorbis, which is easy, you run this through FFmpeg one more time. And if you want to use H.2.64 AAC, it's a little bit tricky. For most video players, the color space needs to be set to YUV 420p. The MOV flags puts the index data at the beginning of the file to enable streaming partial content requests over HTTP. So there's another FFmpeg line at this. And if you're interested in the whole audio mixing and processing and pre-processing or post-processing, this blog post provides you with all the command line tools to try it out for yourself. Very nice. And I think most of these tools are also available on other BSDs. So this is not too OpenBSD specific, except maybe the devices that are detected at the beginning.
So this week's episode is also brought to you by DigitalOcean. If you go over to DigitalOcean.com, you can, in just a couple of clicks, get started with a VM to run whichever BSD you like to do, starting at as little as $5 a month or 0.7 cents per hour.
I'm very happy with DigitalOcean's VM that I'm running now with my little client here for my Quazzle and other things that I'm running on this box. It's stable, reliable, super fast. Everything that I require is there. And if I need more power, then I can very easily scale this up to a bigger instance. And everything is within seconds going faster. But you can start small, of course, and add more power to it over time, or you spin up another DigitalOcean droplet and maybe have some failover between the two, or load balancing. So this is all possible in DigitalOcean's cloud.
Yep. So just go over there, click, create it. Takes a couple of seconds. And if you use the coupon code FreeBSD Now, it'll add a $10 credit to your account. It's the fastest and easiest way to try something on a BSD in the cloud. I know I made Benedict set up a Quazzle core on it so that he could stay on IRC for more than 4 or 5 minutes at a time.
When I shut on my laptop screen.
Yeah, it's made a huge difference in our ability to communicate, being able to bounce that off them. And then, with a cost at $5 a month, I'm not worried about it breaking Benedict's bank account.
No. I'm fine this way. And especially since now we can leave each other messages when there's, time zone difference, when Alan's asleep or when I'm not awake yet, then it's good to pick up the messages in the morning and have not missed them completely. But you can also run other products in DigitalOcean's cloud, of course, like web servers or NoSQL databases or other cool things you always wanted to try. Maybe a little blog, for example. All possible. And they're easy to spin up on DigitalOcean's cloud and, performant as you expected.
Yep. And as the chat room points out, DigitalOcean has some awesome tutorials for newbies as well.
Oh, yeah, right. Okay. In our next bit here, we have TrueOS at the Ohio Linux Fest 2017. So this is over at the TrueOS blog.
Yes. So somebody in the chat room was just asking, is anybody from BSD going to be at Ohio Linux Fest, which is coming up September 29th and 30th? That's this weekend. And it turns out that yes, a bunch of people from the TrueOS team will be there. It's one of the top open source conferences gatherings in the Midwest. Welcome industry professionals, enthusiasts, and users, and anyone else who's into this whole open source thing. TrueOS contributors will be there, represented not only TrueOS, but FreeBSD and IX systems as well. They'll be talking about Lumina 2, FreeNAS 11, not to mention all the other projects that you might find interesting. The TrueOS booth will be T5 and will be open starting 5 p.m. Friday the 29th and from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Saturday the 30th. Make sure to stop, say hello, and pick up some swag. They'll have stickers and other stuff.
Yeah, they always have nice stuff.
Drew will be there and Ken as well, both giving presentations on the Saturday. Make sure to sit down on those and hear about new developments in both Lumina and FreeNAS. Ken is offering his Lumina Rising Challenging Desktop Orthodoxy at 10:15 a.m. in the Franklin A room. Hear his thoughts about the ideas of propelling desktop environment development and how Lumina, especially Lumina 2, is seeking to offer a new model of desktop architecture. Elements discussed including session security, application dependencies, message handling, and operating system integration. And then Drew will be talking about what's new in FreeNAS 11 at 2 p.m. in the Franklin D room. She'll provide an overview of some of the new features added to FreeNAS, including the alerting services, starting specific services at boot time, Active Directory monitoring to ensure that the Active Directory service is always connected, a preview of the new user interface, and support for S3 compatible storage so that you can have a local version of the cloud, and the Beehive hypervisor so you can run VMs hyperconverged on your FreeNAS. She'll also provide a sneak peek of FreeNAS 11.1, which has new features including a complete rewrite of the jails and plugin system in FreeNAS, moving from Warden to IOCage, how to write a new plugin in just a few lines of code, and the brand new asynchronous middleware API.
Yeah, I know that Drew is very on the pulse of the Beehive, not Beehive, yeah, that too probably, but on FreeNAS development because she and her team are writing the documentation for it, so she knows what's going to be in the next release and how it's working. And the question is, who's going?
Yep, so obviously Drew Levine, like we said, she's the technical director, or lead of the technical documentation team at IX, as well as Ken Moore, who's the lead developer of Lumina and a core contributor to TrueOS, but also JT Pennington, or Q5Sys, who is the producer at BSD Now. He's also a contributor to TrueOS, Lumina, and the SysADM projects, and works there at finding and squashing bugs and so on. So if you want to meet somebody from BSD Now, JT will be at Ohio Linux Fest as well.
Yep. That's a nice bunch of people from IX, and make sure to ask them all the questions that you have about the products that IX has or FreeNAS, and specifically there will be certainly a good answer for you by any of those folks. Okay, next up, our Beastie Bits for this week, starting off with Lumina Development Preview Theme Engine. So what's this all about?
Yes, so the TrueOS Unstable branch has begun testing the new Lumina theme engine. It's intended to simplify and expand upon the appearance options in the desktop settings window. While ready for early testing and feedback, please keep in mind that it's not complete. It's tagged as version 0.33. Expects elements to change as development continues. After upgrading to the latest Unstable patch, Lumina theme engine is available under Applications Settings. Many of the disparate windows in the current Lumina configuration scheme are combined as tabs in the theme engine. Settings altered in the Appearance, Fonts, and Interfaces tabs are saved to the lthemeengine.conf, which is stored in your .config/lthemeengine directory. This is the primary directory for the theme engine, but other tabs may look outside of this directory for specific elements. But in general, trying to put all the bits that let you control what stuff looks like on your desktop in one place, including the appearance, fonts, icons, interface options, etc.
Yeah, there's a couple of screenshots here.
As stated, the theme engine is still in active development. The theme engine is based on the Qt5 configuration tool and is currently very stock in its appearance and functionality. Contributors to TrueOS and Lumina are looking to adjust the UI and add more functionality and user configuration options, plus continue to improve its integration with Lumina itself. Giving it a try, please give it a try and let them know on Gitter or Discourse. I've been a pretty heavy user of Lumina for a little while now, and I'm looking forward to all of these advancements in letting me make my desktop work the way I like it to work.
Yeah, I've seen it on many desktops of people at the conference as well. So yeah, it's spreading around. Next up is, it's happening. Official Retro ThinkPad lab he spotted in the wild. It's over at the Register, biting the hand that feeds IT. So it's a small piece. So Anniversary Special brings back much-loved features. The long-awaited Retro ThinkPad will be based on the guts out of a contemporary T470 laptop, Lenovo's business workhorse, according to a German certification site. Lenovo inherited IBM's notebook brand 12 years ago, and with it, a classic design. However, in 2012, Lenovo saw it fit to modernize the iconic keyboard, along with other unwelcome changes. This didn't meet with approval from some stalwarts, who clung to the superior X220 and T420 lines, the last that you could buy with the 7-row QWERTY keyboard. 2 years ago, Lenovo's design chief, Dave Hill, acknowledged that some people would stand in line for the classic version. There are one or two at LREG who would too. In June, Hill confirmed actually that the ThinkPad's 25th anniversary this year, a retro edition would indeed be produced, which Hill promised will embody many of the things people asked for. The German
a T470 with the X220 style keyboard, I think would make a lot of people happy.
Yeah, seems like it. Expect pricing and availability are not finalized, but I can assure you it will not cost $5,000, Hill said in June. And there's a Chinese notebook forum link here. It has a picture purporting to be the ThinkPad at 25. And it closes with that Lenovo can boast that modern ThinkPads have superior key travel, but professional users such as programmers and writers miss the old one. And over the years, several other characteristic features of the ThinkPad were removed, along with the 7-row keyboard we mentioned earlier, and the rubberized coating which returns for the 25th anniversary. It may be harder to reintroduce the 16:10 aspect ratio display, as the industry now produces 16:9, more appropriate to watch movies, an emblem of the funnification of computing. Yep. So yeah, look out for this if you're a ThinkPad fan.
Mm-hmm. That's why I thought it would be worth throwing in the notes here.
Oh yeah, ThinkPad users are...
Other news, over at NetBSD, the LLVM libfuzzer and SafeStack have been ported over to NetBSD. So they managed to finally finish upstreaming the NetBSD support for the ASAN, or Address Sanitizer, and UBSAN, which is Undefined Behavior Sanitizer. For better coverage of the sanitizers and the user requests, he also ported libfuzzer and SafeStack. These are mutual dependencies between the compiler RT features. NetBSD, after sorting out MSAN and TSAN, shall give all of the remaining ones enabled. This is an open topic after finishing LLDB. I've also prepared better ground for the coming work on ptrace enhancements and the removal of file system tracking. But having support for libfuzzer and SafeStack on NetBSD is definitely interesting. Plus, they have some more detail on the work on the address sanitizer, undefined behavior sanitizer, SafeStack, and libfuzzer.
Okay.
So seeing these show up in more of the BSDs is very nice. And this work was sponsored by the NetBSD Foundation.
Excellent. Yeah, they've been at it for a while now. It's good to see the progress that they're doing, that they're happening. And yeah, maybe something will cover over or come over to other BSDs as well.
Yep. And just some final reminders on events remaining in 2017. You know, we finished the last really large event, but there's still a bunch more to come. I guess the first next upcoming one is the OpenZFS Developer Summit, which is October 24 and 25 in San Francisco. I noticed they've been posting about that on their Twitter account. I will be there and giving a short talk about my work to integrate the Z standard compression, but there are also a number of other interesting topics that will be discussed there. Open that up. So it's a 2-day event. The first day will be all talks. The second day will actually be a hackathon. So Matt Ahrens will give a State of the Union on ZFS, followed by a keynote by Mark Maybe from Oracle, talking about ZFS's past and future, now that Oracle is closing off the Solaris bits. Then there's a talk from Lawrence Livermore National Labs on making zpool import safe for clusters. Then there's a talk from somebody at Delphix talking about the performance of ZFS intent log, or how I doubled the synchronous write speed of ZFS, which is big news for anybody that runs a database or anything else like that on ZFS. Then iFlash, dynamic adaptive L2 ARC caching, so making the L2 ARC smarter as well. And then Delphix is also working on faster allocation with the log space map. So actually using a log in the space map instead of just whole space maps, and how that can make things faster. Intel is talking about D-RAID, or declustered RAID. It's their way of using all the disks in a pool to recover from a failure instead of only the disks in the same VDEV. Jorgen Lundman will be talking about porting OpenZFS to OS 10 and how that effort continues. There's also another engineer from Delphix talking about fast clone deletion, so making clones clean up faster, and I'll be talking about the Z standard. Then over at the hackathon, some interesting in-progress stuff. One of them is from Matt Ahrens, is a proposal to do 1,000 times better dedupe performance.
Ooh,
that's a very big number in front of the X, so that sounds interesting. Sassel Kisilov will also be talking about improved resilver, the results of his work and operational impact that has had. Another developer from Delphix will be talking about storage pool checkpoints, being able to undo any operation on a pool by doing a checkpoint first. Very useful for upgrades and so on. Tom Capulti, who did the ZFS encryption work, will be talking about a new prefetcher for sequential scrubbing and how that's working. And then, very important news, Matt Ahrens will be speaking about his project, which is a coordination between Delphix and the FreeBSD Foundation to offer RAID Z expansion, being able to add a disk to an existing RAID Z VDEV.
Yep.
This is one of the killer features that ZFS has been missing for years.
Mm-hmm. And that's just this event. There's also the Usenix Lisa 17 from October 29th to November 3rd in San Francisco. And
yes, that's the Large Systems Administrator Conference. I will be there for one of the days, the 1st, November 1st? Yes, November 1st, to hold a ZFS BOF, or question and answer type session. So if you're at Usenix, look for ZFS on the schedule and come find me.
Yeah, the foundation and the FreeBSD project also have a booth there, I think, or a combined booth.
Yes, the FreeBSD Foundation will have a booth that I'll be helping to man.
And of course,
and then there's the FreeBSD Vendor Summit will be November 2nd and 3rd. Although that's invite only. And then lastly, don't forget about BSD Taiwan, November 11th and 12th in Taipei.
Check out their new website. Since last time I was there, they have bumped up their design a little bit and added speaker BIOS and schedules and all that. So it looks
the website has gotten a lot fancier.
Mm-hmm. Yep, so if you can make it and are in the area maybe, then you should definitely check it out. It's a new conference we're doing, so I'm excited to see what the result was going to be. And check it out.
And the talks seem like a very good selection of interesting things, including RISC-V, Berkeley hardware for your Berkeley software, OpenBSD virtualization and the cloud, graphics support for Beehive, is it time to replace mmap, high-performance computing and GPU acceleration, Poudre image building for custom FreeBSD images. And then on the second day, somewhere, or is it sideways? Click on Sunday. Then we have ZFS Advanced Integration for servers, laptops, embedded, and appliances. Theodorat, mitigations, and other real security features. FreeBSD RISC-V and device drivers, or how to write device drivers for FreeBSD. Case studies of sandboxing the base system with Capsicum. And memory management improvements in FreeBSD 12.
Okay, that's a good mix of talks, and that should be something for everyone in there. Okay, I think that's about it for our BSD Bits this week. And before we go into our feedback and questions section, it's time for our sponsor for this section, because it's Tarsnap, like all the other weeks before. The online backups for the truly paranoid. Remember, we've been at a conference and it could happen that our laptops died suddenly, or we lost it somehow, or it got stolen, and it's a good way of having backups when you need them, and they should be stored in a way that only you can retrieve them from the cloud in your new device or another.
And not only that, when you're at a conference and you want to do a backup, you've just finished this amazing feature and, you worked all night on it, and you want to be able to take that backup. Tarsnap's deduplication and compression means that you're only sending a small amount of data up. So you can do that over the Wi-Fi at the hotel or the conference without, saturating it and making everybody else in the room hate you, or it's just being impossible because there's too much data to upload over the network.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that can happen easily. Yeah, because Tarsnap is the way to do this, because if you know how to use Tar, then you can also use Tarsnap. It's very similar. And there's also GUI clients now available, and there should be
it's easier than ever to use Tarsnap.
Yep, and to have backups and restore when you need them.
So, head over there, check it out. You only need $5 to get started. So that's very low cost to try it out and see how it works for you. But really, there's no other service that offers as secure a backup. And since that's really probably the most important part of the backup, do you really want to trade that off for something else?
Yeah.
Okay, on to the questions.
Yep, the first question we have this week is from Andrew, talking about BSD teaching materials. He writes, "Hi, Benedict and Alan. I wrote to you many months ago that my university doesn't offer an operating systems unit." Yeah, I remember this one. Regarding episode 207, talking about teaching BSD at the Dev Summit, he would absolutely love any recorded lectures of the Teach BSD material, or even any BSD-related operating system material suitable for an undergrad. And he also says, "Keep up the good work, and there are definitely people interested in the content." Thank you, Andrew.
So they've been working on this. I know the first couple sets of recordings didn't turn out very well. I know Watson said
we did
that,
So when George was teaching in my university it was already in February back then, before heading to EuroBSDcon. So we did a recording. They had like a camera and a microphone when he was walking around the room, and also had zooms of the slides and if he wrote something on the whiteboard. But actually, when I played it for the people in the teaching session at BSD Cam, the quality was less good. So I think it needs some post-processing maybe, but George wasn't very happy with the result and would probably not be releasing those. But I know that they did recordings of the L41, which the Teach BSD material is based on, which is the course they do at Cambridge, and they're doing another round of teaching this year. But they did a recording from last time, I think, and they will somehow make this available through some kind of channels that I currently can't recall.
Like with the version you recorded, I think the lighting wasn't very good, and I'm not sure about the audio. The very first round of L41, I think one or two of the videos didn't work out, and then one or two of them ended up not having audio when they should have. And then the second round, similar sets of issues, but on different videos. So I think if you put it all together, you might get one complete set of the things, but they're not the same. Right? You'd mix and match from the two different sets of recordings. But yes, the ultimate goal is to have videoized versions of all these. It's just a matter of making that happen. Turns out the bunch of us are not great at video stuff.
Yeah, it's not, and it's also capturing only one lecture and not the whole thing. If you only watch videos from a lecture, you might get a different perspective. And with the material together, it's probably worth it. If you're looking for operating systems material, well, I can recommend you Systems Performance, Enterprise, and the Cloud by Brendan Gregg. It's not in the first few chapters, it explains a lot how computers work and how operating systems build on top of the hardware, and then it goes into systems performance, of course. But I found it a very good introduction with very good illustrations and a lot of good text describing how processors work nowadays and how they interact with memory and the caches and all that. So it gives you a good introduction how computers work basically from the hardware, and also how the operating system hooks into that to get the information that you can see as a user. That would be my recommendation as a good starting text.
Yep. Next.
The next is from, let's see, Seth here, switching to Tarsnap after crash plan becomes no more. Yes, yeah, this has been going around the internet. So it starts off greeting us, saying, "Hi, Benedict and Alan. He's been listening to the podcast for about a year or so, and he has heard that we mentioned Tarsnap on multiple occasions. Yes, we're big fans." He writes, "I've been with CrashPlan until recently, but they decided to pull the plug on the home tier of their backup service. Well, now that I have..."
Specifically with that one, any service that offers you, unlimited storage for $5 or something, at some point, that's going to cost them more than they make off of it, and so they're going to pull the plug on it. So that's why I always look for a place that's actually going to charge me something that makes sense, where I'm going to pay for how much I use, not just a flat fee for unlimited. Right? Anybody trying to sell you unlimited anything, it's a scam. It might work out for a long time, but it's eventually going to implode on itself.
Yeah. So he figured out it might be a good idea to check out Tarsnap. He was suspicious at first that the syntax was close to BSD tar, but now he believes that it's working now. He writes, "I got it installed and configured from my FreeNAS box, even made a nice script that emails me status reports at the end of the backup." Very nice. "What more do I need? All I wanted before was a no-frills backup, and at least Tarsnap does not rely on bloated Java to make things run. That's one Beehive VM I can kill now. Thanks a million for promoting this great product." Oh yeah, this would please Colin Percival, the author of Tarsnap.
It really is that easy, so it's worth checking out.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for this feedback. Next up is Thomas with native encryption in ZFS. Oh, I see what's coming here. He writes, "Hello guys, I heard Alan say he talked about native ZFS encryption in FreeBSD and what is missing to make it work during his talk at BSD Cam. As I understand, the porting of Elomos bits might be harder for FreeBSD. I was just wondering if you could do a segment on it, or if it does not sound interesting, could you point me to where I can read about it?"
Okay, so the feature was originally developed in Linux, but they did it by porting the Illumos crypto framework to Linux. I would say in general that porting the Illumos crypto framework to FreeBSD would be less work than porting it to Linux. However, I think the implementation on FreeBSD will use our existing OpenCrypto framework, and so it should be relatively easy to plug it in. The issue is our current OpenCrypto framework only supports one of the two algorithms. But as far as getting it to work, that will be enough. It just won't be completely compatible with Linux immediately. And maybe we can get that last bit fixed. So, no one has started work on this that I know of yet. I haven't had time to look at it, and I don't know that I will anytime soon. But maybe over the Christmas holidays, I'll have time to keep digging in on this if somebody else hasn't made progress by then.
Well, you have other things to do.
I hope to get to talk to the original author of it a little bit at the OpenZFS Dev Summit.
Yeah, maybe there's some updates there. Alan is busy doing other ZFS stuff, like Z standard, which we mentioned.
And 100 other things.
Yeah, if only that. Yeah, sorry we have no more info for you, but we're all waiting, and it's getting there. It just needs a little bit more time until it appears in FreeBSD. Last question for this week is from the Coding Cowboy about passwords and clipboards. He writes, "I watch the show every week and love it. You guys are awesome. Thank you. I just wanted to toss something at you. If you're using a password manager, be aware that you need to turn off your clipboard manager before you copy your passwords. If you don't, then your password will be on the clipboard manager's session screen."
Yeah, so we talked about how clipboards work in X a couple of episodes ago, and in particular how there can be more than one clipboard, and then how you can use things like clipboard managers to keep multiple things on the clipboard and be able to stack and unstack them and so on. And obviously, yes, if you're using a password manager that's going to copy your password to the clipboard and paste it into the box on the website and maybe then delete it from the clipboard by putting something blank on the clipboard, if you have a clipboard manager that keeps history of your clipboard, then the password is going to be right there, and you're going to want to be careful of that.
Yeah, otherwise there's no... the whole password manager thing is... not much use if it's all there in plain text in your password clipboard buffer. Anyway, good feedback. Yeah, so this is pretty much what we have for this week for you. And as always, send any questions you might have, comments, show ideas, feedback from conferences, maybe your first conference that you've been to at a BSD event somewhere.
Yes, especially if you promised in person to our faces that you would send us an email detailing your experience at your first conference.
Yeah. We got some contacts there with new people, and now we have faces to a couple of emails, which is always nice. Yeah, so send them to feedback@bsdnow.tv, and we'll cover it in a future episode.
Yes, and special thanks to Frank, who emails us a giant list of links every week and helps make the show possible. If there's any content that you would like to see on BSD Now that we have not covered, please email it into us, and then we'll be able to look at it. Basically for most of October, we're going to be continuing our ridiculous schedule of recording 2 episodes a week to cover the fact that OpenZFS, the FreeBSD Vendor Summit, and the BSD Taiwan stack up to be 3 Wednesdays in a row that I'm not home.
Yeah, so we'll pre-produce so that you have a show episode each week to watch.
Yes, we will continue to put out an unreasonable amount of effort into making sure that you get to listen to me talk every week.
Yeah, some of these items might be a little bit outdated by the time the episode appears, but it's still
Well,
worth
the point
watching.
is, it's stuff you wouldn't have heard about if you weren't listening anyway. So
Yeah, you might have missed the good bits.
we try to deal with the timely stuff. But in particular, if you have something timely, like say a BSD user group meeting, try to get that into us as soon as possible so we can try to get it in an episode that will actually air before your user group meeting instead of after.
Mm-hmm.
We had that problem when I think it was registration deadline for EuroBSDcon, and one of the local user group meetups, we found out about it, the week we recorded an episode, but turns out that episode didn't air for 2 weeks, and
it's already over then. Yeah. Oh well, we'll make it
Yes.
better in the future.
Send us all the things, and if you agreed to an interview in person, help arrange that. Come on.
Yeah, it's not so hard.
And if you didn't agree to an interview, agree to one anyway and email us.
Yeah, if you have something to talk about in the BSD area, any BSD, any good applications, then yeah, let the world know about it.
All right. We will see you all next week. Thank you for watching.